Kyle here from allmediareviews.blogspot.com. Modern progressive art rock albums list, counting down numbers 20. This is part 12. I haven't been saying the parts, but this is the 12th part. Numbers 20 through 11. And I'm going to try to wrap this up today, actually, so for various reasons. Anyway, so left off on 21 with Cloud Coat's Light Chasers yesterday on part 11. So part 12. Number 20, Horses Galloping on Sailboats from Kaddisfly, which came out in 2015, which was a bit of a sort of reunion slash comeback album, although given when By Your Intention Will Buy You Unicorn came out 10 years before this, and that album has those three closing tracks, which named both that album, this is the title track, the album that followed it, and then this album. We knew that this was, from the fans at least standpoint, was supposed to be coming out. You know, it's the third of the trilogy of the history of like the planet Earth, and in some ways. But the thing is, they had been on hiatus. The members had basically changed. Four of the five members formed a new band known as Water and Bodies, which I like. But I never liked it as much as Kaddisfly at all. Wasn't as much prog rock, but I still like Water and Bodies. But that was in 2008 or 2009. I think it was 2009, or maybe it was 2010. It was around that time. So it'd been like 5 or 6 years they'd put out anything, and they got back together like a year before this came out or whatever. And it was really something they had done. They were trying to, I don't know if they were trying to pursue Kaddisfly as a full-time gig before this. At this point, it was like a, isolated thing that was, it was for the fans. Was it a one-off reunion per se? I don't know. They didn't mention that. I still, to this day, it's been 7 years since this album came out. 7.5 years. Would like to see them do more, even do like some live shows, but to do more music. But I know, not Bo, the drummer from Kaddisfly is with, hold on a second here. Okay, hopefully I can just combine these two videos. But the drummer from Kaddisfly is in a band called Small Pools, which has had sort of Bo Kuther. Yeah, Bo Kuther. They've had some success. They still are a touring band, and they've released music and everything like that. It's interesting how the other members are on. They have links here because I know they guest starred on some other stuff. That's probably because of the Water and Bodies thing mostly. Old Hick. But anyway, getting back to Horses Galloping on Sailboats, this was a massive deal for it to come out because of that gap in time, and I loved the previous record so much. I mean, almost the point that I fell in love with that previous album, knowing that there was going to be a follow-up. I was super excited for this, but it was like a long wait. That the album itself, it was almost going to be impossible to live up to the expectations with some of the fans like myself. But I actually think it did. I don't think it exceeded it. And as you can see, it's not necessarily my top Kaddisfly album, but I think it met the hopes and expectations for this record. It's a really well composed, well produced album that in a lot of ways it's a step up in production, in the vocals especially. Sound a lot more like Chris Ruff's vocal lines are cleaner and easier to understand. It's a trip. It's a magical album in a lot of ways, from the middleman to the watchmaker to the author, and the closing track, The Apparition. I think that was the only thing I kind of felt like held it back a little bit, was The Apparition is great, but it sort of ends sort of really quietly, and it goes on for a while. So that's maybe the only issue I have with this album. But let's see here. So they do a lot of guitar textures, almost like a Pat Metheny thing at points. They vary the guitar textures more in this album. It's sort of the end of the world, really. That's what because you have man's created, then man's living, they're screwing things up, and then this is what happens at the end of the world. Man, or all life forms, because there's like the owl, sort of the main character, the main part of it, in the whole trilogy of albums from them. But it, I mean, it has the Kaddisfly sound, a lot of those, heavy guitar riffs, that kind of, it's not metal, but they get to be very, very distorted and very, very loud, very, and there's the two guitars, so the twin guitar lines. But, the piano arrangements are great. They use some synthesizers. I don't know. I mean, there's still a lot I love about this album. I haven't listened to it in a number of years. I was kind of in awe of it when it came out, just because I didn't know if wasn't even certain it's ever going to happen. And I mean, it's one that I probably should go back to more now, just because how much I love it. If I think of 2015, this is one of the first albums I always think of. But yeah, I mean, it's got a lot of anthems and themes. It is a worthy follow up for the previous record. But why it didn't surpass the previous record is largely because I didn't get so like I didn't find I wasn't like I didn't listen to it as much. That's the simplest explanation. But I mean, it's been 7 years. It's just like I had my sort of honeymoon with it. And then if this had come out right after, like they had those demos they released and rarities on Bandcamp, which there were some songs on there I loved after Set Sail the Prairie came out. I think I probably would have been more attached to it then, but it was just kind of like one of those weird things that, are they ever going to get back together? I don't know if it's going to happen. And then it happened. It was kind of surreal. And a lot of these albums I need to go back to. I fall in love with, embrace them, and then they're just kind of there oftentimes. Maybe I'll listen to a song or two. I played a couple songs on KFA radio. I think it was the Watchmaker, maybe, or the Painter. The Painter is actually, think about it now. The Painter is probably my favorite song on this. The bright sort of textures they use on that song, sort of literal and physical. Hence the title of The Painter. But yeah, this is a terrific record. If anyone who's a fan of Kaddisfly has heard it, but if you've never heard Kaddisfly, actually this would be a really good starting point. It's not even as long as Set Sail the Prairie. It's about 56 minutes. So anyway, Horses Galloping on Sailboats, which, the whole title is really kind of a play on words in a way. It's like, well, horses can't gallop on sailboats. You can't sail on a prairie. Anyway, number 20 from 2015. Number 19, from 2009, the Dredg album, the Pariah, the Parrot, the Delusion, also referred to as just Pariah by a lot of people. An album that they kind of worked on, and it had to do with the label and a lot of other things for many years. It was 4 years. The people that love Catch With Their Arms, and this album definitely lived up to a lot of the hopes and expectations. It's a very epic record. They're probably their most progressive rock like album. I mean, it's a lot of sweets, the Stamp of Origins and stuff like that. A lot of highlights, a lot of the sort of classic favorite Dredg tunes. My go-tos, always, Gathering Pebbles is, even though it has like a sweet 80s vibe to it, is my favorite song on this album, and always has been, and probably always will be. That wait for me, it's long, it's dreamy. And very much sounds like I was going back into the 80s. Back to the 80s, rather. The track that follows it, Information, is super catchy and poppy. Love that song. The edited version, not so much. The full version, kind of U2-ish, in some ways. Then I would say Ireland is terrific. The lyrics are a little weird. I don't want to leave anywhere. I don't need it. I got everything I need here, beyond these town limits. I kind of think of that like a couple of like sci-fi and films, sci-fi episodes of TV and films, like with that, where you don't go anywhere, you're here, and then sort of virtual, and we don't really realize, almost like the Truman Show or Dark City and some other stories. Quotes is the other like pretty big highlight on this album for me. That's epic. It's talking about among other things, sobriety from drug use, and these drugs will expand us, all this stuff, but it's a great arrangement, a great build, great segue. The rest of the record, all good songs. Morning This Morning's another dreamy tune, kind of melancholy in some ways. I Don't Know was one of the first singles. It's very catchy and energetic. Savior, another one, that little like little, it's like a funky synth patch that Dino I think is using on that one. Light Switch is decent. Pariah, the opening track. They use a kids choir. Cartoon Showroom, Long Days and Vague Clues. Some of the instrumental sections are great. In some ways, this is Dredge's most sort of cohesive record, or in some ways, their most beginning to end. It kind of is very well structured. I guess is the best way to put it. I don't know. I mean, it's Dredge is a band they're so good at times, and the releases, their best albums are so. I'm in awe of them at times that I don't like to compare records that easily, but I love this record. I bought a bunch of different copies. I think I had two or three copies on CD, and I have the vinyl, which has I think one part that skips, but a great record, even though the title's kind of long and it took so long. It was like well worth the wait. It really paid off. Loved. I think the guys from Judgment Day played on a couple of the songs on the instrumentals too, who toured with them. So, the Stamp of Origins and everything like that. But Dredge's album, The Pariah, the Parrot, Delusion from 2009 at number 19. Number 18, the Reign of Kindo album, the debut album, and I enjoy a lot of like Dredge and Kaddisfly, a lot of these bands. There's multiple albums on this list, but this and among the many debut albums on this list, this is one of those. Rhythm, Chord, and Melody from 2008. An album and a band, when I initially was introduced to them, I wasn't so sure about because there's a very poppy, like a jazz pop, sort of almost One Republic element. That was my impression initially. Now, if you never heard the Reign of Kindo and you know One Republic or you don't like One Republic, that's not the best impression. They're really more a band that's more resembling like the Deer Hunter and like Mew or Mute Math, but that's still kind of not being as fair. This album, they put out obviously there's other albums that are on this list that I like a lot too. This is still my go-to first and foremost because of my nostalgia for it, and it just is filled with songs that have great hooks. The most progressive song in a lot of ways is the song Till We Make Our Ascent. The segue on that song, the drum work especially, among others, at the bass line, Joey's vocals, it's terrific. I get goosebumps every time I hear that track. And then of course they made the sequel, the follow up on the next album. Now We've Made Our Ascent, I think it is. On this is what happens. Not this is also. That's weird in the release order. That's wrong. Anyway, because the next album was This Is What Happens, and then the 8-bit version or whatever was released after that, I believe. But the moments in between, Breathe Again has very ironic, dark, even ironic, just dark, kind of creepy lyrics in some ways about someone sort of basically taking it out on some creepy Santa on Christmas time, who wronged his wife or girlfriend or someone he cares about. I assume it's a he, someone they care about, I guess. But anyway, musically it's still a great song. Great Blue Sea, Let It Go, Something in the Way That You Are, the title track. I hear that music play. The Mystery of Our Day. Hold Out is the one, maybe the most crazy drum song on this album. That or the title track. But it is jazz pop. It's very jazzy. The piano is almost the primary or the lead instrument at times. Although there's still a fair amount of guitar on here. But the songs are just terrific. And Joey's vocals are great. My only kind of small issue with this record is that on some of the records on this list, the cymbals clip at times. I would love them to go back and remix them, but this album kind of grew and grew on me, and I would listen to it. The last decade and change, I would go back to this. It came out in 2008, probably around 2010, on the second album. I would go back to it regularly, and it's a great energy record. Every song has like these adventures they take you on, as one person I remember putting it. So anyway, the Rhythm, Chord, and Melody, the debut album from the Reign of Kindo from 2008. at number 18. Then go to the next 5. Number 17, the top Mew album on this list, and the Glass-Handed Kites from 2005. An album I didn't hear until 2006. And, I've explained my initial impressions with Mew. I heard this record first. I got it from that lala.com, which is like an exchange trading compact disc site in the mid-2000s. And I thought it sounded like Enya. I thought the vocals were like really high helium filled. It was just kind of... I wasn't digesting it well, but after giving it a little time and hearing Frengers and some more, I went back to this and I got totally won over. Even though the cover art has been criticized, like a lot of their cover art albums on the cover arts on their albums, but no, I mean this record is epic. It was produced also like Frengers by Rich Kotze. They were in like LA when they did it. I think the short and initial answer of my take on this record is, the very first, a lot of people have this impression, 7 tracks here. From Circuitry of the Wolf all the way to The Zookeeper's Boy. It's just like, the energy and flow is just unmatched. It's so good. It's so big at times. It sounds like just this large scale of layers at times. The vocals especially. Apocalypso and Zookeeper's Boy are probably the go-tos among those 7 tracks and on this album altogether. The riffs on that, the bass lines, the dynamics, they're progressive. Special was a little bit of a minor hit, and it is more kind of soothing, feel-goody, almost sort of danceable a little bit. And I always think of course, the Hulk Hogan and the interviews. I know that video is still around where they were asking people on the streets of like New York City about it. They were giving them headphones and stuff, and Hulk Hogan goes, Mew, P-U, Mew. But the one guy goes, oh, it sounds a little bit like Rick Springfield. You can dance to it. I don't know if the video is available anymore. I don't think it is, sadly. Maybe it's on like Vimeo or on Daily Motion. But anyway, that I remember with Special. But Special is a great tune. China Berry Tree, Why Are You Looking Grave, which actually features, the Mew podcast just did a podcast on that specific song. It features the singer from Dinosaur Jr., who's not a band I typically like, but I really like his performance on that. It's kind of like an old man kind of sounding thing. The previous album, Frengers, they had, of course, the young girl singing on Symmetry as sort of a contrast. There was an article that wrote about that. So that was my take initially. It's like I like the first half of this record. The second half is sort of hit and miss. And to this day, I still slightly feel that way. But some of these songs have grown on me, and I've really come to feel like, because the first half is so damn good, and I've enjoyed the second half a lot more, it kind of takes the top spot for Mew's catalog for me now. But again, it's of course splitting hairs. Frengers is still an album I listen to a little more, but I don't know. The thing I forgot to mention about Zookeeper's Boy, I always think of, because it talked about going into the city, I always get like the Science Asleep, and then I saw the Science Asleep that fall of 2006 when I got into Mew, and that song I had been listening to. I get really like dreamy feelings about that. Also, there's a song later on this. I think of my first initial experience meeting my wife at the radio station in Minneapolis, and it brings me to tears wanting to go back to that experience. I think it is Luis Luisa, which is the closing track, and it's super, super sad and melancholy. This is like a Porcupine Tree or Blackfield song in some ways. What a Day I've Had. It's like this whole trip, sort of out of a dream, but it's like what a day I've had. I feel like I'm going back in time, but it's also sad in that, it's like I'm lost and I can't find my way home. Someone help me. It's like someone crying out. But I don't know why I think of that whole experience of like, I wish I could go back and meet my wife for the first time. I'm sure people have that sort of sad, melancholy thought of wanting to have that experience again when they celebrate their anniversary or whatever. But it's just, there's something obviously a magical, that sort of initial experience, like, did this really just happen to me? It's almost the kind of thing where you think about it more later than when it actually you don't really realize. You think about it when it's actually happening, you don't realize it's happening. It's surreal. That is probably the saddest Mew song they've ever done. I mean, it's just, I have a hard time not getting into tears now listening to that tune. The rest of the second half is still good. I mean, Savior of Jazz Ballet, Fear Me December, Envoy to the Open Field, Small Ambulance, Seething Rain Weeps for You. I mean, it's sort of a sweet, and White Lips Kiss. It's sort of a sweet. So some of the songs just kind of blur. I don't, because they're really edited together. They don't just like end abruptly typically on the second. This whole album you could really just describe as like a long suite. It could be one song in some way. A little bit like Misplaced Childhood, Pleasant Shade of Grey from Fate's Warning. But yeah, this is an amazing record, and the Glass Handed Kites. And I think it's still an album that I could say I love as much, but I still go back to it and it continues to grow on me. So Muse album and the Glass Handed Kites from 2005, number 17. Number 16, I think this is the second Oceansize album. We had Efflores. Well, this is Frames from 2007. The first album they released on Super Bowl Music. And 2007 was just a fantastic, magical year for new albums for me. And this album came out after some of the other records like Kaddisfly and Fair to Midland and October. But it sort of, I love the last record, and I was not wanting to believe this album was better, but I kind of can't deny in some ways it is better in terms of production, and it's more prog rock. And I think the prog rock scene really caught on to some of them caught on to them, Oceansize, with this album. Conceptually, I've come to believe that it's sort of at least a loose concept about, or inspired by Friday the 13th, the original film, the one where, spoiler alert, it's not actually Jason Voorhees, it's his mother. The story is sort of about him. But there's a song called Voorhees that's a bonus track on here. And there's another song called An Old Friend of the Christies. That was a reference, who ran the camp that Jason's in Friday the 13th. But this is a very dense, but again, it's not as heavy in some ways as their previous record. But yeah, I mean, it has the Oceanside, the classic riffs and the build of those sort of breakdowns and dynamics that you love with Oceansize. Unfamiliar is still probably my go-to on this album. That and the last track, The Frame, which is just super big and melancholy also. But it's very goosebump worthy. It's like celebratory and melancholy. It is sort of post-rock. I've seen comparisons to Godspeed You Black Emperor and some other bands, Mogwai. It's so big. It's very like orchestral sounding in some ways. That Unfamiliar, just from Commemorative T-shirt to Unfamiliar, that those first two tracks are just a 1-2 punch. A little bit like the Anathema records, both of those the two Anathema records I had on this list, the top two. Trail of Fire is nice. I like the use of strings on that. Savant as well. Only Twin is great. Sleeping Dogs and Dead Lions is a song that sort of, it fits on the album in a way, but it's very different. I always think of Frank Zappa with that track because it's just very dissonant. But I also think of the Friday the 13th, like, someone's being hunted in the woods, they're being run at. They're being run after, and they're running away from Jason or his mother in this case. But you never really see that during the movie until the end. The riffs are very dense, and they've used those riffs on the record that followed this and some of the previous records. So, yeah, I mean, the Frames is a masterpiece in a lot of ways. Most people I know, I mean, it's the Oceansize fan base and among the catalog. A lot of people favor, 3 or even the EP, which I mentioned in the EP's list, Music for a Nurse. But, I've seen more people actually praise this album more than anything else, Mark Herron's drum work included, just in terms of at least the progressive rock scene. It's not my top Oceansize album, but it's, again, splitting hairs. So, Oceansize Frames from 2007, number 16. Number 15... another British band, because I'm doing a lot of European. Muse from, of course, Denmark, but they actually spent time in the UK. Oceansize is from England as well. What's the city? I always think the city that a lot of bands are from. I should know this off the top of my head. Manchester. Well, Purism Revolution, I don't think is from Manchester, but I think I had two other Premier Purists. They're just from London. They actually formed in London. Anyway, this is their pretty famed debut album, The Dark Third, 2006, which came out with a different track list on the U.S. version that year, and then there was a 2007 version that came out with a different track list from both of them, which includes, so the truth is, if I'm going to one album, I go to the actual 2007 version that includes all the songs on both, including maybe one or two bonus tracks as well. But this is the one that introduced I had the Cautionary Tales from the Brave, which was like a mini album EP, which came out a few months before this. But in truth, in 2006, this was my favorite album, my album of the year that year. And I have the most nostalgia specifically for this version and this album. But, including like my favorites, the 2000, I guess you'd say the 2007 one is really the one to include as part of that, because it pushes it over the top, I think. I have this on vinyl too, but the best song on here still remains for me the Twins and Trembling Willows, which wasn't on. I don't believe it wasn't on the American version in 2006. That's the crazy vocal parts and guitar riff interplay is just, it's super big, and it's so fun to listen to. The build on that is just great, even though the vocals are kind of going at you like guitar parts in some ways, like do 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 do. I don't even know what the hell they're saying. But the rest of this record is a fantastically flowing record. I mean, a lot of people lean toward the Bride and Bastards of Morning, which is a reference to the Pink Floyd song Echoes. Yeah, it's really good. The riff and the big riffs, especially that headbangable part. The little like noodling goes on for like a little bit too long for me. I eventually came to conclude that hurt this record slightly. Still my album of the year from 2006, I believe, but Goshen remains. Apprentice of the Universe was on that mini album included in this. It's always been a favorite. I love the sort of build on that. It was one of the first songs I heard from them that was on their MySpace. Voices in Winter, in the Realms of the Divine, similar in some ways to the Twins and Trembling Willows, but very kind of epic in some ways. A lot of textures on that. Bullet Domine is a ballad with some piano. I really like that. So just kind of, including some of the Exact Color also as a similar kind of ballady, dreamy element that, there's a lot of Pink Floyd influence on this album, but it's in a good way. It's one of the coolest ways to show your Pink Floyd influence ever. In Aurelia, Borgens Vor. Of course, this version includes Golden Clothes. That was the kicker which put this album slightly over the top for me after hearing it, even though it's a 2007 version. I adore that track, even though it's super electronic. But the vocal arrangement's great. It kind of is a foreshadowing what they would do on the next record, more Vincent Omnia. But it totally works for me. The Arrival, The Intention Craft, another track, and also Nimbos and Tambos. Both those songs are really catchy. They have great sort of build-ups, crazy instrumental sections. They're just fun and just busy and dreamy and atmospheric. Purism Illusion, people that know them are in awe of this record. It's like Scenes from a Memory from Dream Theater in some ways, And I don't know if they'll ever make a record as good, sadly. But if they don't, I'm still happy they're putting out new music. I love the band, and this is still their crowning achievement, even though it was their debut album. So, Pure Reason Revolution's debut album, The Dark Third, in the different renditions or versions of it, number 15 from 2006/2007. So number 14, we have Oceansize again, the previous album, that came out from the previous album from Frames from 2005. This album was the first Oceansize album I heard, and I remember reading the description in that red.net at Cheapo because I was looking into them. They were recommending this album specifically. It was like Radiohead gone, like melting your face or something like that, like space metal. And I'm not a Radiohead fan, but I love a lot of bands that were directly influenced by them, and so I can understand that. I love the flow of this record, even though I think in some ways the Frames is maybe the flow is maybe a little bit better. I still love this album track to track. I think it's actually bigger in some ways than both their other records that are on this list. The Charm Offensive is a great opener. It just gets so big, just and Mike Vernard's screaming and everything like that. It's like he just was getting out all this emotion. I am. The riff is so heavy after that part. Do 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 do. I feel like I sound like Beavis and Butthead now. That's one of the standouts. I mean, there's a lot of standouts on this album. The other clear standout to me has always been the closing track. So it's like the bookends are maybe my favorite parts of this album. The Ornament / The Last Rung. Now, not the Dredge song Ornament, of course. Matryoshka. That's a closing track. It's weird how Dredge and Oceansize both put out albums the same year with a song that closed with the word ornament in it. That track to me has always sounded like a song that's from like a prog or psych band from the 70s. It's weird. It's very epic though, the way it builds, and it's like, similar. I mean, the Oceansize are masters with their album closers, like because the closing song on F the Rest, which I'm spacing on the title right now, the Long Forgotten, I think, Long Forgotten, yeah, and then the Frame on Frames. I mean, it's just Ornament and The Last Rung might be the best of all three of them, and they're all unbelievably good. The album that followed it I don't like as much, that followed Frames, but it's just like they had these three straight albums with just these closing tracks, which just are amazing. Heaven Alive is another one. It's still big. It's kind of a little more uplifting. Homage to a Shame. Music for a Nurse was a single. Meredith is very post-rocky, very kind of dreamy. No Tomorrow. You Can't Keep a Bad Man Down. I know there's some stuff that sounds like washing machines, and there's some quirky elements in this. And I know other people that love them found this album to be a little more like pop oriented in a way. But I like it when Oceansize does pop, and when they're doing any kind of thing that's sort of poppy, and even Mike Vernard's solo band. So yeah, I mean, this is, again, it's a lot of these bands catalogs. It's splitting hairs between the what one or the other, but my heart still says, especially for nostalgia purposes, this is my number one Oceansize album. I like the orange cover. It's creative in a lot of ways. But some days I feel like the Frames is better. Sometimes I might just reach for FRS. It just depends. So anyway, Everyone's Position from 2005 from Oceansize, the same year that Mew released. They released literally the same day, which is just weird and eerie. Both those two albums I heard in 2006, and they both had to grow on me. They released the exact same day. I should actually consider September 19th a holiday. It's only 5 days before my anniversary. All right, so number 13. Technically, this is the very first 5-star album still. I mean, I think I had Hotel the Laughing Trees, Tearing Everything After still at 5 stars. But Small Leak Sink Ships, Face Yourself and Remove Your Sandals, my top record from 2015. And actually, to this day, it's still the most recent album I've rated at 5 stars. In fact, I haven't found a 5-star album among any year since this album. Although, some of these albums I may eventually promote to 5, as they say, promote to 5 stars. But this is Small League Sink Ships, this band from Portland, originally from Arizona. They, this album kind of came out of nowhere. I had heard about them. They had a previous record. They had some medical and, health concerns with the band at one point. But that was probably why they had such a long gap. I think their previous record had come out like in 2010, 2009, Until the World Is Happy. And I haven't gone back to that album in a long time. 2007. So yeah. I think they had like an EP between that. But anyway, so there was a lot of sort of inspiration and, personal, like medical and like emotional elements or inspiration on the writing and recording of this album. My favorite tracks, I mean, it's got a lot. I don't know. I kind of lean toward Midnight Gin still. that the build on that song is great. The vocal, like the gang, like the layered vocals. Building Blocks is another one that is It's like instrumental prog rock. It's the drum work is great, very tight and almost math. They're a math rock band, I guess, and they're considered post rock too. But that song is just sort of, you got odd time signatures and dynamics throughout that song. It's just terrific. The hi hat work and the way it layers, the cloudy synths and everything. The Mind is its own place is another favorite of mine. That the epic closer, speaking of like Oceansize and other bands that have great epic closing tracks, 9 minutes plus, is so much passion and emotion in that. I don't know. Some of this is influenced by the experience of one or two of the members that in a hospital stay, and so that was kind of like their inspiration. Like, we're gonna get out of this place and get better finally. There's so much emotion on that song, the way it ends, and it's uplifting. It's really uplifting at the end. The rest of it, Yellow Bird was the first track they released. It's interesting, and I think I'm gonna have to pause again because my kitty cat is having some issues. All right, so I'm just gonna try to wrap this up. Anyway, Orcus, We All Die is very, very much. This is very much. I mean, it's metaphorical, but also literal in a way. I also have this weird, and Iceberg is another highlight. Devils in the Desert. It flows really well. I have this weird, like, sort of image of, I think of the second Halloween movie when she's in the hospital. They talk about how hospitals and power, all this stuff. It's I could literally try watching Halloween 2 without the sound and see if it would sync up, or any like movie or TV show in a hospital, but it's more dramatic, not your typical like ER or something like that, or Scrubs. It would be more of like a dramatic thing. Like, there's tons of TV shows and movies that involve hospitals, patients that are in a hospital, that it's more dramatic. The illness in the hospital isn't the primary focus, although I suppose metaphorically some of this is sort of someone who's laid up in a hospital and they're trying to kind of get through the therapy. But it's just musically, snowball fight, attack formation. There's some humor and like levity to try to get through a dark situation, and it's their most progressive rock. The record they released that was also on this list after this, Golden Calf, I like. I don't think it says prog though. But musically, Small League Steamships are pretty unknown, especially among progressive rock fans. But Menomena and Wolf Parade are the two bands that remind me of the most. But they have their own sound in a lot of ways, and they're going to probably come out with a new album this year and next year in 2023. Their last release was an EP that was more electronic, so I'm wondering if the new record's going to be more electronic. But this album, I don't know why the fan base prefer Golden Calf. A lot of the people I do see comments, I think this is a masterpiece. I wish it could put it on vinyl. They put out Golden Calf on vinyl, but I'm not begging. I'm just happy we got it, of course. Small League Steamships, number 13. So go to now we're into the top 12. Speaking of Menomena, I Am the Fun Blame Monster, their debut album. So, you could almost rename this list, modern progressive art rock albums, including many debuts. From 2003, my album of the year from 2003 now, my number one record. It's definitely an album that works best beginning to end. I mean, it has highlights. My biggest highlight is the Monkey's Back. The organ sound, like that Hammond B3 organ use, the arrangement is great on that Brent Knopf does. And, his vocal lines. Of course, I mentioned in previous Menomena albums, there's the Brent songs, the Danny songs, and the Justin songs. The Brent songs, I think he only has one other song on here, but Rose, the last two songs, if I'm not mistaken, which they released as an EP previously. But I think some of the best Justin and Danny songs are on this. Cough Coughing, The Late Great Libido are great. It's epic. The use of saxophone. Justin's saxophone stands out. Strongest Man in the World is another one. Trigger Hiccups, that's really energetic. Is it my go-to always for Menomena? Not necessarily, because it's more atmospheric and mood-oriented. But I still find it's the most impressive record beginning to end. And it's without any songs I skip. Oahu, I don't even know how you pronounce that. Is it like Hawaiian? I'm not sure. It might be a sitting, I don't know, 20 cell revolt. I don't know. Every time I would go back to this record after listening to the other records, I would sort of be just like, yes, I still like this one the most. The artwork is interesting. The cover here is just one part of it. It actually has like this animated, almost cartoon like movement because it's just like this big book that it came with. And I know they won the Grammy for the full length album, that the proper full length that followed this, Friend and Foe, for the artwork. I don't know if this did. It should have, but I did finally get it on vinyl a few years ago. But yeah, I Am the Fun Blind Monster, which actually isn't like the lettering or is like an acronym, if you rearrange it, like an anagram for the first Menomena album. I'm not sure. Yeah, TF, the first, Menomena, and then A, then you have the B. I know that it's in there because I remember reading that was how they came up with the name, because it's really nonsensical. I am the Fun Blame Monster. But it worked, and some people compare them to like Zeppelin too in a way. The drum work is really good on this. In fact, I think the drum work is, the production, the mixing, the drum work on this record, I don't know if they ever topped it after this. So anyway, Menomena's just incredible debut album from 2003. I Am the Fun Blame Monster from 2000, at number 12. Number 11, the last one on this video. The long-awaited build-up for this record among fans, Mercy, the Dancing for the Death of an Imaginary Enemy from 2008. Their debut album, I love, and I'll be talking about that in the next video, of course. This album, though, I had been a fan since like middle of 2005, and it took 3+ years to come out. The songs were played live for many years, so I knew all these songs live. Oh, not all of them, most of them. But it just, the 6-year wait, because it was 6 years from Precious, the previous record, which is on this list. It was a classic case of an album that, all the extra work and time and effort they put into it felt like it really paid off. My favorite tracks on here, well, The Worst Thing's Beautiful was I think the first single, and the one with the video. That's still, in some ways, my favorite Hours song. It's just so big. When I was trying to play some of their music for my wife, that was the song I introduced to her. Jimmy's vocal lines are just, it's epic. It's very U2-like, but it's like U2 on steroids, like, to quote Mike Portnoy. Of course, but one thing about this album was the song Mercy, which opens, which is really big, and the song Murder were played live together, and for the longest time, waiting for this record to come out, it was of the assumption that they were going to be released together as like an epic. So that those two together would actually be a little over 12 minutes. I don't know if that was a label thing, Rick Rubin, who produced it, decision, or Jimmy just wanted it that way. But I think it would have been neat for that to happen. That being said, both those songs turned out great anyway. It sounded great in this recording. Murder, as Jimmy says, he's never heard anything quite like it. Is it trumpet or trombone? The arrangement on that's really that drumming. The drumming, the build on that song is just infects the rhythm. And then sort of Middle Eastern chanting and everything. The energy's off the charts. Live Again is another sort of huge falsetto track on this album that works even better live, but it still comes off great on this record. Other highlights, I'd say, Willing is super catchy as well. That could have been, remember they were asking what song they wanted them to release a single for. Was it Worst Things or Willing? Willing is great. The energy on that song is terrific. Saint, which I guess is about Jeff Buckley. It's been well documented, the whole Jeff Buckley thing, even though I've never felt like Jimmy sounded that much like Jeff Buckley, but he was friends with him for a brief period of time, and he was his guitar tech, or he like helped him with the guitar. There's a story he told on YouTube on a podcast within the last couple of years, clarifying some of that, how he was guitar tech, he was his roadie. No, he wasn't his roadie. But anyway, that song's about him. It's pretty, it's kind of sad, melancholy in some ways. It's a ballad. Lost is a ballad too. I think I liked Lost. I remember liking Lost a little better live, but it's still pretty epic. Black is dark. This is probably the darkest song he's ever written lyrically in some ways. But it has its charm. It's kind of almost very moody and very kind of in your face in some ways. Ran Away to Tell the World is sad. The cello arrangement is great on that. God Only Wants You, somewhat similar in a way too. And Get Up, of course, that repeated vocal line that includes his daughter. It's kind of an uplifting end to this album, which has a lot of dark tones. A lot of R's music is dark. It's just dark and very kind of, it's Misery Loves Company in a lot of ways. In fact, he has a song called Misery Head on another album I'll be talking about in the next video. But anyway, so that's Get Up. Get Up is a great closer. I mean, I remember at one point I said this was like 4 to 4.5 stars, and then I bumped it up. I don't know. I'm kind of going back and forth, and I still love this record a ton. But I still think among their catalog, I think I'd rank it the same way. I mean, I got to do an R's ranking at some point. But, at one point I was almost feeling like this was my favorite R's album, and nah, I mean, it's damn close. Still love this record a lot. So anyway, Mercy, Dance for the Death of Imaginary Enemy, number 11. So I'm going to stop now. I got to do a bunch of editing together and everything, and then hopefully time allows, I'll complete this thing out later today, and I can finally move on to other things. But thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and we'll see you next time.